Excellent. Right. So the first one is spawn spotting. And I mean, it says spawn spotting for HIWARG, but the records go into national databases, so they will help all sorts of organisations that tie into these. But the idea is we were just thinking it was such a large area of Hampshire to cover. We've got our own surveys, which are a bit limited at the moment, but we also thought actually there's lots of people going out for walks, lots of people posting pictures of amphibians and frog spawn and stuff like that in the last lockdown, sort of saying, oh, look what I found, I've not seen this before, and what about this? And there's all this information that's going out there and it's not getting recorded. So that's like such valuable information that can all be added into the databases, and then we can pull on it. National organisations can pull on it, and this was actually spawn spotting was actually something we started off to just people going out for walks just to record what they see, and we thought actually if we can sort of give them a little bit of help as to what they're looking at, that's what spawn spotting is. So I'll take you through it. I'll try not to ramble too much, but just give me a shove if I am. So as I said, spawn spotting is basically it's recording sightings of amphibians, especially frog spawn, while out walking. And frog spawn's quite an easy one to spot, especially early in the year. And all records, as I was saying, they're really important. They tell us on the distribution, because we've got lots of blank areas in Hampshire, and it's just getting the man hours, just getting out to get out there. That's where walkers, ramblers, people with an interest can actually help just bring those records in. Also helps with population size, because as people start recording things, especially if you're going to the same walk on a regular basis, all those records will build up. It can often identify threats, so we might actually realise that we've got a population here, and maybe next year we might actually notice that the numbers are down, so we might go, oh, well, why are those numbers down? And it sort of flags up lots of different things, so quite useful. And also phenology, which is it's the seasonal change when something first appears, when it's most often around. So basically for frog spawn, it'll be when it first appears, the last frog spawn of the season, and the peak period when you've got the most frog spawn. So it's really useful for tracking what's going on year. So it's that sort of information, and all your observations help conservation. And what do you need to do? And I'm just going to check, because I think, yeah, I thought I skipped on then. So basically it's as much as little as you want. Some people like to go out and they like to record lots of things, and they'll be out all the time. And when the season starts at the moment, I'm just like, I think I've chewed my fingers up to my elbows, because it's just like going out for walks and just waiting for everything to start. But if you're just going out walking your dog, or you're out in your garden weeding and you come across a toad or things like that, it's all that type of thing. So it could be in your garden when you're on a walk. Record as much as you want. You might say, we saw some toads, don't know how many, but this is that there we found them in this location. So it's that sort of information. It just puts a little dot on our map, so we go, we didn't know those were there, and if we can expand on it if we need to. If you want to put more information, that's really good. That makes it sort of better for us. And also photos, because quite often people will submit photos and it might be there's something unusual. I'll divert slightly. Someone sent me a photo once, and it was of an alpine newt, and but I was fairly sure it wasn't an alpine newt because it had a spotted belly. So I was thinking, well, it can't be an alpine newt, because everywhere says, all the guides and that, they say alpine newts don't have spotted bellies, and this had a spotted belly, but it looked like an alpine newt. So I was like going everywhere trying to find image, and it turned out it was it looks like it's a subspecies that's was quite unusual. But so photos can come in really handy. And not just spawn. I mean, while you're out walking, if, especially sort of March and onwards, you might actually spot a lizard or snakes, something like that. And all that information is really useful. So we got there COVID-19. So I thought I'd put for both talks, I've got something on this, because they're affected in different ways. I'm not going to read through this, but that's the two main bits about minimising your time out. And in particular, this one, so being local is actually defined in the guidance is avoid travelling outside your village, town, or part of your city. So that could be an issue. But if you're still going out for your exercises, you're only recording your observations. It's not the COVID restrictions at the moment shouldn't affect your spawn spotting if you want to be a spawn spotter. I'm going to go into some of the animals you might see, and particularly the spawn. I'm not going to go into spawn and tadpoles on most of them. Just going to give you a bit of an overview and where you can find more information. So the two main animals you'll probably come across is the common frog and the common toad. They're both roughly the same sort of size. There's some differences. I'm just going to put my laser on it. That's probably better than my pointer. Particularly the mouth and jawline of both is probably one of the key ones to see. And in fact, if I bring this next picture up, it was a rather confused frog that is paired up with a toad, and you can actually see the different angles of the face there. The toad's got a very much more rounded face. Frog's very much more pointed face. Both have got eyes on the side of their head, pretty much. Toads, they've got these little glands behind their eyes. So if you can see a fold of skin behind the eyes, and also the eyes themselves, frogs will have sort of an oval egg-shaped pupil. Toads tend to have a golden bronze eye with a horizontal slit on them. So it's so they're good first indicators if you see them. You could go into saying that frogs will jump more often and toads will walk, but that's not. You might find it. Toads can jump, so you might find a toad that's jumping. But if you look at basically the front of the head and the eyes, you notice toads are generally got a much wider head. But this is what we're hoping you're going to pick up. Frog spawn is in clumps, tends to be on the surface of the water, sticking above the water, and that's for a special purpose. As toads, is the scientific name for toad is Rana temporaria, and it uses temporary water a lot. It needs that the much higher warmth in the water, so they will try to lay their eggs, get them to mature really quickly and get back out again, because it's they tend to leave the water soon after breeding or live quite close. Toad spawn is in strings, so you'll get natterjacks will be single eggs, and common toads will be 2 eggs either side, sorry, in twos. And then we've got our tadpoles, so you might see tadpoles as well. To start with, they're both quite dark, so it's very difficult to tell at the start unless you've seen the spawn as well. As they mature, common frogs will actually go more speckly colour, and they go more, it looks grey from a distance, but if you see them closer up, they've got a sort of like a metallic sheen to them, whereas toads will always, when this one looks a bit red, but they tend to be more a black, dark brown. But close up, if you get them out in the right light, they will see this sort of more sort of reddish brown. But it's much more uniform, so that's a good way to tell. But if you find the spawn, that's really good information. And you can actually hazard a guess. I'm going to show in a second. You can actually hazard a guess at the population size as well with the frog spawn. It's harder with toad spawn. But the common frog, they spawn from, we say January to late March. That's basically what it is. But with phrenology, we're finding that some are now starting to spawn in December as well. January to late March, 2,000 eggs plus per clump. Sometimes it can be as many as 4,000. If you see your clumps, try to count individual clumps. I mean, this one was from a pond near me in Hook, and there was just tons and tons of spawn. It was basically a whole area of jelly. And when you get that, you might sometimes find them in large mats. It's almost impossible to count them all. So what I tend to do, work out a rough meter square or yard square, depending on which measurement you use, and try and count as many in that area as possible, and then just sort of extrapolate that out across the whole mat. And that gives you a rough estimate of the spawn, which we can actually use to work out roughly how many adults were there as well. I think in this pond, this was last year, And I think there was something like 280 roughly clumps of spawn there. It's a huge amount. Toad spawn is harder to see because it's underwater most of the time. It's wrapped around plants, and because it's in strings, it's really hard to tell how many strings are there. So a lot less eggs, about 1,500 eggs per string. And so if you do want to record a guesstimate of what it is, it's better to sort of say in the notes when you record it, I'll show you that a bit later, just to say the toad spawn was along 3, 5, 10 metre stretch of the pond. And in that way, it's actually in the notes of the records, but it'd be really impossible to count how many strings there are. And the last note is you can actually record the spawn in the pond over several visits, because you will start off seeing 1 or 2 clumps, and then a week later it might have gone up to 10, 15. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, you could have something like this with like hundreds of clumps. So it's those records are really useful. Going on to the newts, I'm going to quickly skim across this. It's more to just point out the native newts. It's sometimes it can be quite difficult if you're just walking. It can be quite hard to tell in the pond just by visual as you're walking past. Palmate newt is our smallest newt, and so called because they're in breeding season. The male palmate newt has got a webbed back foot. They've also got a very thin filament on the back of the tail, but you probably never see that in the water. But if you see a newt with quite a clumpy back foot, that's quite a good indication. There are smallest newt. The next size up is a smooth newt, which there's not a massive difference. So sometimes they can be quite confusing, especially when they first come back to the ponds. They tend to be a bit shriveled and that from living on land for a few months. So they come back and they sort of swell out with the eggs and everything else. So, but the smooth newt is often mistaken for the great crested because it has got a crest. But it tends to have these sort of spots, quite large spots on its side, on its flanks, and you'll see when I show the great crested, the difference in size as well. So that's quite a good telling. But these two are roughly the same. You've got the great crested newt, which what I tried to do on this, because obviously everyone's viewing on different things, I tried to use the correct proportions. So I use the females because they're easier to measure, and I tried to get, they should be roughly the same dimensions to look at. So the great crested newt, males have got this sort of magnificent crest, very jagged, and this great big dagger-like tail with a white flash on. So you can tell the difference if you see a great crested newt in a pond. Sort of quite dark with speckles on the flanks. You don't often see the yellow because obviously that's underneath, and they tend to generally have stripy toes. I should also say, don't worry if you're taking notes. We are going to, as Pete said, we are recording this, and we are going to put these up as PDFs, so you can download and do what you want. So it's if you'd like to just sit back and listen and have a drink, and that's fine. So there's no need to really take notes over all this. But yeah, great crested newts are protected species of newt. And so it's illegal to disturb them, handle them, catch them, kill them, injure them. So it's important that if you do see them, don't handle them unless you're actually sort of lifting them out of the road or something, just to put them somewhere safe. Then you might also notice larvae later in the year, normally sort of April onwards. But these are quite often mistaken for fish fry, so you might not see them. So I'm not going to go too much into the larvae at the moment. Less common but notable species. Some of these we're really interested to find. So there might be a prize if you find some of these. Natterjack toad, they're only really found in one place in Hampshire, so I'm not expecting anyone to come across those. There are protected species of toad, same as a great crested newt. Unlikely to find them. They like very shallow, sandy ponds. So they're found in very specific situations. Got the midwife toad. Now this is one that we think there's anecdotal evidence that there are midwife toads in Hampshire. We haven't got any specific records as such, But I know someone who would be very, very keen to find out if you see these. They call it the midwife toad. The male, you can see it's quite a small toad. The male they get the name the midwife toad because the male drags the eggs around by its back legs. They've also got this. If you go onto Google and onto YouTube, sorry, and search for midwife toad calls, it almost sounds like little sonar beeps. They've got this little beepy call. There's some comments that we might have some in the Winchester area. So if you are in the Winchester area, keep a listen out for sonar going on. They tend to breed later in the year, so this will be sort of more towards the end of spring. But have a listen out for them anyway, and obviously look out for them as well. Alpine newt is another one that we've got a couple of records in Hampshire, but I've been talking to ARC and they felt that there's possibly more in Hampshire than we think, because there tends to be quite a lot. I think they're just under-recorded. Midwife toad and alpine newt both brought in as part of the pet trade and escaped. Alpine newt because it is quite a stunning animal, about the same size as a smooth newt, and very colourful, but is known in the UK in the pet trade to carry the chytrid disease, which affects amphibians. So it's something we do want to track. It's handy to know where they are, so then we can sort of maybe in the future test them for diseases and stuff like that. Going on to water frogs. Water frogs is a name given to a collection of frogs. So we've got the pool frog, marsh frog, and edible frog. So again, I try to give the perspective of size. They call them water frogs generally because there's some hybridization amongst them. If the pool frog and the marsh frog breed, then you end up with the edible frog. And also if the pool frog and the edible frog breed, you end up with the edible frog as well. So it's a bit of a mix going on there, a bit of a complex between them. So the pool frog is the smallest, roughly the same sort of size as our common frog. The biggest difference visually, they can be quite tricky to tell, is the eyes are closer together, not so much on the edge of the face. That's easy to say when you've got pictures of both together, or you can reference things, but out in the field, it can be a lot harder. The biggest thing I think is the easiest feature is the nose, because although it's pointed like the common frog, it's a lot deeper and it's more sort of torpedo shaped. So if you look for a frog with a torpedo shape with very long legs, it could potentially be a pool frog. They tend to have a stripe down their back, although marsh frogs don't always, and sometimes edible frogs don't. So it's not always, it's one of those things, you get a wide variety of colours. So you can see they go from bright green to mottled like the common frog. But that just gives you some ideas. And also another difference is if you can hear them calling, because they are very noisy, they will call during the day. They also like to sunbathe. Again, they breed later. You won't find frog spawn for these, unless you're really looking. They tend to hide it away in vegetation. But the pool frogs have these white vocal sacs on the side of their head. Marsh frogs have dark grey, and the edible frog is normally a colour in between. Common frog will have underneath its throat, has its vocal sac underneath its throat. So that's the difference there. So if you see a frog like this, it's definitely a water frog. Getting help with IDs, I mean, it gives you a few little pointers as we're talking. But for some guides, one of the best ones is just a quick dip-in thing, and it's free as well, which is always good. We've got the amphibian identification sheets from a joint project between HIWARG UK and Amphibian and Reptile Conservation. These are free to download on the ARC website, the HIWARG UK website, and on the HIWARG website as well. So you could download these, laminate them, whatever. That would be a really useful guide. There's also lots of pointers for identification as well. So that's a really useful guide. I will sell this one as well. If you are going to buy a book, I've got a few amphibian and reptile books, but definitely for a beginner and also for people that want to carry on through. It's a really useful dipping book. Is Britain's Reptiles and Amphibians. Lots of useful, I don't know if you see it on there, lots of useful pictures and guides. So there's lots of photo guides on there, lots of text information as well. It makes it really nice and easy to get into. There's also Field Study Council produce this little fold out laminated guide. It's only £3.30. It's okay. It's useful for taking out. I quite like using these with children because they're laminated. They can crease them up, but they're splash proof, so they're good for at the water's edge. You can also get help from us as well, HIWARG. So our website, as I mentioned, we've got, if you go to our website, groups at arguk.org/HIWARG. If you go to info and ID guides, we've got all our identification guides there. So you've got the amphibian one, you also got reptile. There's the newts and larvae is actually taken from this one. Excuse me. And there's some non-native species sheets as well, plus lots more down here. Lots of guides, and we'll be adding to that as we go. Well, our Facebook group, at the moment we're sat twiddling our thumbs. So any pictures you want to come and post on our Facebook group will be snapped up, and you'll probably get a faster response there than anywhere else because everyone's just sat down there waiting for stuff to happen. So yeah, so if you post on there, you'll get lots of advice and help. And it's a public group as well, so that's good. And we've also got our email address, so you can email that if it's something of a more sensitive nature or you don't want it to be more public. You can just email us and we'll help you out that way. I'm quite keen, as people probably attest to, on biosecurity, on stopping diseases spread and stuff like that. So if you are walking out and if you can sort of check your boots and things like that, make sure that you don't transfer stuff between sites. If you're going between sites, you give them a clean and just all wash down, maybe a bit of a scrub and brush. It doesn't have to be anything, just make sure there's no clumps of soil or plants on it. There is actually, both on the ARG website and also on the HIWARG website, we've got like an amphibian disease precautions, which just gives you an idea. If you want to use a bleach solution for cleaning your stuff, it just gives you an idea on there, a bit more information, and then just make sure they're dry. So normally what I do is when I come back from a pond or something like that, or gone out for a walk, I just go in the garden, just hose everything down, and it sort of blasts everything off. So recording your sightings, it's not that scary, and you can use either record pool, or you can also use iRecord as well. I've just got a guide for record pool up on here, but they're both very, very similar, both easy to use. And the only reason I'm using record pool is because it's a collaboration between ARG UK and ARC. So when you record your site, both sites, you just Google the sites. We can actually put the links on the website actually if you need them. That's probably a good idea. And you sort of normally set your name up. You can actually do sort of blind records, so you don't need to put your details down. Just go in as a guest. But if you sign in, then if you keep going back, you can then actually look back on your records. It will keep them. But they're both GDPR compliant, so it will store your data safely. Once you put your information in here, the boxes become ungraded and you can start adding them. When you enter your location in here, it's the location of the site you went on to, either the postcode or the nearest place name. It will actually bring up a little map button. If you click that, you can actually zoom in and then put the marker where you were, where you saw the animal, and it will actually put the reference in for you. So then you don't really need a grid reference. I will be telling you some tips on grid references in a second, but you can actually use both for iRecord and Record Pool. Both got the map option. Once you put the time in, it then brings up some drop-down sections. So you can just put down the species, lifestyle, life stage, sex, etc. You can also put some photos. As I said before, photos are really useful. And then you can add them, and every time you add them, it just puts a new line in, and then you just click add. So if you've seen 3 or 4 animals, different types of animals at the same space, you could just keep adding those records. And then any comments you want to add, because sometimes the comments are really useful as well. To help with grid references, I'll just quickly go through this one, but they are going to be on the slides if you need them. So You've got View Ranger and OS Locate. These are apps for your phone. When I go out, I generally have like a GPS unit because it's slightly more reliable. But if you're going out for walks and stuff like that, these are quite good. I actually use View Ranger on my phone, and I'm slowly doing guides and putting them up on the website as well. So we'll get those for View Ranger. OS Locate is very similar. It's the Ordnance Survey version. They are free and subscription services. You don't need to subscribe to them at all. The subscription just gives you extra stuff if you're going to start doing geocaching and all sorts of things. It helps you store your data and stuff like that. There's also some free ones. There's GridPoint GB on iOS, and there's Grid Reference. It's on Android. Both very basic. GridPoint's got a bit more than GridPoint's got more than Grid Reference. Grid Reference is basically just a grid reference and a compass, and that's it, nothing else. Very basic, but they're useful things. Grid Reference Finder on the internet is a good website. You can actually just browse in on a map to any point anywhere in the world, pretty much. I think for the UK anyway. But you can then right click and it will there on a location, and it will give you grid reference, postcode, bearings. It gives you lots of information about where you've clicked, and so it's useful to find that information. And as I said, Record Pool and iRecord have got the inbuilt finders. And just remember to ask for our help. So if you've got any ideas and you're not sure, ask on our Facebook group. As I said, you get a far quicker answer on there. You can also email us if you wish. Couple of bits just to put on the end. If you go out and get excited about amphibians like we do, you might want to do a bit more. Some of it's open to the public, some of it's members only. Membership's only like £6 a year, so if you wanted to join, it's quite cheap, and there's no commitment. You don't have to do a set amount of things. It's up to the individual, but we do all sorts of things. We've researched, and this is a grass snake fungal disease. So we sometimes do research on different diseases. We've got one we're looking in at chytrid in pool frogs that we're doing. We've got species training. We give full training on surveying, amphibian surveys, reptile surveys, habitat management. That's always good this time of year normally. Unfortunately, this year it's been a bit curtailed, but going in sort of chopping stuff about, it's a good way of getting your angst out. We also do rescues. I think I'll put a picture, both of those are rescues. So we sometimes get involved. If there's fires, we might go a couple of them when we're told it's safe. We will go look for any animals that might be stuck in the middle of desert. And sometimes we've, many a time I've been found with my head down a drain, rescuing animals out of there. So there's lots of different things going on if you want to do more than just spawn spotting. And if there are any members that are tuning in now, this is we've got big plans for surveys, COVID permitting, and in March we've got another one of these Zooms. It's a members only one. We're going to be talking about getting people up survey ready. We're looking at beginners and intermediate, rolling out of new survey protocols, surveys suitable for new and experienced surveys. So we'll base it so you don't have to think, oh, I'm not going to be able to cope with this. It's going to be down to how much you want to do and how much you're comfortable with, and you don't even have to do it on a regular basis. It's up to you. Obviously, we've got some great Crested Newt surveys going on, and we've also got non-native species surveys that we're going to be hopefully pushing. And then we've also joining in with Turtle Tally, and we're going to be doing some more in-depth stuff around that. Turtle Tally, if you didn't know, is it's Hadlow College doing a survey of terrapins and turtles that are non-native and out in the wild. So at the moment, there's a lot of information about terrapins and turtles, saying that they decimate ducks and stuff like that, but there's not really much factual information. So hopefully this is going to be building on the back of that. But yeah, so if you are interested in that and you're a member, give us a shout and we'll get you sorted on that and get you moving on that one. And that should be quite exciting. So we hope to see you soon.